In the cold theater of power, the moment you defend yourself, you admit weakness. You've already lost the first battle, the control of perception. Power, in its rawest form, is not just about what you do, it's about how others interpret your silence, your presence, your refusal to explain. Machiavelli understood a brutal truth: the more you explain, the more you give away. And when you defend yourself, you place yourself below your accuser. The defensive posture is, by definition, submissive. Even if you're right, the damage is done, not to your logic, but to your status. Because power does not flow from correctness, it flows from control. In the court of the public, perception always trumps truth. The moment you try to justify yourself, the spotlight no longer rests on your power, it shifts to your insecurity. The urge to defend is emotional. It's your ego attempting to repair a wound, to restore a tarnished image. But Machiavellian psychology is not concerned with emotional repair, it's concerned with dominance, leverage, and silence as a weapon. Those who command the room don't chase understanding. They don't beg for clarity. They allow the ambiguity to grow, because in that uncertainty, others kneel to interpretation, and that interpretation bends toward power. Watch closely what happens when someone levels an accusation or subtle insult. The weak immediately respond with justifications. They rush to correct the narrative. That's not true, they say. Let me explain. But what they fail to realize is this: the act of defending is an implicit admission that the opinion of the attacker matters. And this is the trap. By defending, you validate the attack. You expand it. You place yourself inside a frame that they constructed. You have stepped into their domain, and now you're dancing to their rhythm. Machiavelli would advise you to stand still. Let the arrow land. Let the echo swirl in the air. Let others wonder why you remain unmoved. Defensiveness is reactive. And in power dynamics, the reactive man is the lowest on the hierarchy. He doesn't act, he responds. He doesn't lead, he follows perceptions. And worst of all, he reveals his internal state. The moment you defend yourself, you tell the world what affects you. You mark your weaknesses like open wounds. You tell the wolves exactly where to bite. This is not about morality. This is about psychology, pure, strategic psychology. And if you want to survive in the arena of power, you must be more than right, you must be untouchable. Machiavelli understood that silence is not absence, it is presence without vulnerability. When a powerful man is accused, insulted, or misunderstood, he gains more by holding the silence than by explaining. Why? Because silence triggers projection. The human mind abhors a vacuum. If you say nothing, others will fill in the silence with their own imaginations. And that imagination is far more terrifying, more mysterious, more dominant than any excuse you could offer. When you explain, you close the story. When you remain still, you become the story. This is why the most dangerous men in history were often misinterpreted. They did not correct the record. They let myths grow. They let rumors swirl. They allowed themselves to become enigmas, because the unknown is always more powerful than the explained. Napoleon once said, "Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake." But a Machiavellian would go further, never interrupt your enemy when he is defining you. Let them speak. Let them assume. Let them believe. And then use it against them. When you don't defend yourself, people assume one of two things: either you're guilty, or you're above it. The weak panic at this ambiguity. They want to control the conclusion. But the strong embrace it. They understand that to rise in power, you must be willing to let people misinterpret you. You must sacrifice being understood in the short term to gain psychological leverage in the long term. This is not about fairness. It's about the game. The more you train yourself to resist the urge to explain, the more unpredictable, and thus powerful, you become. Defensiveness also signals emotional instability. And in power psychology, composure is dominance. When your face shifts, when your words become shaky, when you overclarify, others sense blood in the water. Even if your words are correct, your energy is not. The strongest men are not those who always win the argument, they are those who can afford to ignore it. They let others argue in circles while they observe silently. They wait. And then they strike, not with emotion, but with precision. Cold, calculated, surgical precision. That is Machiavellian warfare. In the realm of reputation, self-defense is a trap. The more you try to defend your name, the more others will question it. A powerful man lets his reputation be shaped by the silence that surrounds him. He understands that people follow confidence, not explanations. The moment you defend yourself, you fall from mystery into desperation. And desperation is anti-magnetic. It repels. It makes you look small, uncertain, and mentally unarmed. The Machiavellian plays a different game. He plants seeds of uncertainty in others while remaining unmoved himself. Consider a courtroom. The man who panics on the stand, who pleads and over-explains, is seen as weak, even if he's innocent. But the man who answers calmly, briefly, and refuses to elaborate beyond necessity, he becomes a force. His restraint becomes power. His silence becomes a threat. That is the effect of non-defensiveness. It creates an aura of psychological weight. It tells others, I don't owe you anything. I know who I am. And I will not perform for your comfort. The defensive man plays checkers, the silent man plays chess. When you defend yourself, you make your next move obvious. You show your hand. You react to the board instead of controlling it. But when you say nothing, when you respond with a still gaze, a slight smirk, or nothing at all, you hold your strategy close. And this disturbs people. Because in power dynamics, mystery breeds fear. And fear breeds control. Silence is not passivity. It is restraint in service of domination. You are not avoiding the fight, you are choosing when and how to fight. That is the Machiavellian approach. Defensiveness is fast, desperate, emotional. Silence is slow, intentional, surgical. When someone tries to humiliate you, and you don't respond, they begin to fear your reaction. They know you heard them. They know you're aware. And yet you offer nothing. That blank space becomes a psychological mirror. They begin to fear what's coming, because they no longer control the narrative. Now let's get darker. Imagine this, someone publicly insults you, expecting an emotional meltdown. But instead, you remain still. You meet their gaze. You say nothing. You do not laugh. You do not explain. You let the silence stretch like a blade between you. In that moment, they begin to sweat. Why? Because they expected a reaction, and received only stillness. You've broken the pattern. You've shifted the frame. And now they feel exposed, not you. That is the reversal. That is the power flip. Not by shouting. Not by arguing. But by not lowering yourself to the need for validation. In psychological warfare, power is not taken, it is surrendered. And the man who defends himself surrenders without realizing it. He gives up control of the frame. He becomes the accused, the cornered, the emotional. But the Machiavellian never accepts that role. He reframes. He flips. He makes the attacker look desperate. How? By refusing to engage at their level. Instead, he lets their words echo in silence, making them look small, loud, and unstable. This strategy is terrifying to those who rely on manipulation through guilt or outrage. They expect you to defend. They want you to react. That's their hook. When you don't, they become louder, more erratic, more exposed. You, meanwhile, remain poised. And that contrast destroys them. You let them self-destruct in public, while you say nothing. That is how you flip the dynamic, by allowing their instability to be seen, without ever revealing yours. Even in relationships, this principle applies. The moment you're accused of something, and you rush to prove your innocence, you lose emotional frame. But if you respond with calm indifference, or a short, unmoved statement, you remain in control. Defending yourself to someone who already doubts you is wasted breath. And worse, it trains them to use doubt as a tool of control. Machiavellian psychology tells us this: if someone attacks your character, and you reward them with explanation, you've just taught them that your identity is negotiable. That your power can be questioned. Never allow that. The man who never defends himself becomes an archetype, the unshakable, the unknowable, the sovereign. People don't know where he stands, but they feel that he stands tall. And in the world of power, that's enough. You don't need to be understood. You need to be felt. And silence, when wielded correctly, is not absence, it is a statement louder than words. In every social structure, whether it's politics, business, or even love, the moment you feel the need to clarify yourself, you've given the upper hand to perception. And perception is not neutral, it is hijacked by the loud, the emotional, and the cunning. Machiavelli's brilliance was understanding that in any conflict, power doesn't lie in who is right, it lies in who controls the narrative. And the greatest control of narrative doesn't come from talking. It comes from strategic silence. From letting others wonder why you're not flinching. From watching them destroy their credibility trying to provoke a response that never comes. Understand this: the Machiavellian does not avoid battle, he chooses the terrain. And in psychological warfare, terrain is emotional framing. If you get pulled into the frame of defending your honor, your values, your past, you've lost the higher ground. Why? Because the terrain is now emotional. You've allowed someone to bait you into an arena where dignity is no longer earned, it's begged for. The Machiavellian avoids this terrain. He turns his back on the need to be seen as good. Because the pursuit of goodness is often a trap set by manipulators to control you. You may think, but what if the accusation is false? That is irrelevant. The Machiavellian does not play for innocence. He plays for control. Truth does not protect you, perception does. And perception is shaped not by facts, but by posture. The man who carries himself like a king, even when falsely accused, forces others to hesitate. His silence says, if I am guilty, why am I so calm? Why do I not tremble? It plants doubt, not about him, but about the accuser. And in power, doubt is more effective than proof. The need to defend yourself often comes from the childhood conditioning of approval seeking. We're taught that if someone's upset with us, we must fix it. We must explain. We must clear the air. But Machiavellian psychology slices through this social illusion. You do not owe the world your innocence. You owe yourself your composure. In fact, defending yourself too much signals guilt in the eyes of many. Why would an innocent man plead so desperately? Why would he try so hard to be seen as good? The truly innocent often say little, because they know the truth requires no performance. Power lies in restraint. Not just of words, but of emotional exposure. The more unpredictable your responses, the more you control the tempo. The defensive man plays on the opponent's terms. The Machiavellian forces others to question whether they even understand him. That's where mystique is born. That's where influence begins, not in what you say, but in what they can't figure out. You become a mirror to their insecurities, their doubts, their assumptions. And mirrors are powerful because they reflect, without ever reacting. In modern society, we see countless examples of how this plays out. The celebrity who refuses to clear the air after a scandal gains more mystique. The executive who responds to criticism with a short, cold press release rather than an emotional explanation becomes feared. The man in a relationship who does not spiral into emotional chaos when misunderstood, who simply withdraws, observes, and lets the storm pass, gains psychological leverage. Why? Because restraint is masculine. It radiates inner control. And inner control breeds external dominance. Look even deeper. The reason people demand that you defend yourself is because it makes them feel powerful. They enjoy watching you squirm. It gives them the illusion of moral superiority. And most importantly, it gives them control over your emotional state. But when you do not give them that performance, their power collapses. They can't feed off your anxiety. They can't extract submission. They are left yelling into a void. And that void, that silence, becomes your weapon. Because now they are exposed as desperate. And you are revealed as immovable. Machiavelli would urge you to reframe attacks not as problems, but as opportunities. Every insult, every accusation, every attempt to discredit you is a moment where your enemy expects to see fear. Don't give it to them. Give them stillness. Make them doubt their strike. Let them question whether they just made a powerful enemy. This is the reversal, not defending as an act of psychological warfare. You don't win by making people understand you. You win by making them doubt themselves. The art of not defending yourself is not passivity, it is active ambiguity. And ambiguity is unsettling. People crave clarity. They want to label you, define you, box you in. And when they can't, they feel powerless. They lash out. They make up stories. And the more they do this while you remain silent, the more unhinged they appear. You become the man whose power is felt but never explained. The man who doesn't chase approval, who doesn't beg for his image to be repaired. That is Machiavellian power, cold, silent, and devastatingly effective. This isn't just a mental game. It's biological. In evolutionary psychology, high-status individuals are often marked by their lack of reaction. The alpha does not bark at every provocation. He does not flinch at every sound. He responds only when it serves his strategy. Defending yourself emotionally or verbally is the equivalent of barking at every squirrel in the forest. It signals insecurity. It signals that your status is fragile and must be protected through performance. But true dominance is indifferent. It doesn't explain, it observes. And here is where it becomes lethal. When you choose to respond after long silence, when you break your stillness only once, it lands like a thunderclap. Because you've trained others to expect silence, your rare response is terrifying. It carries weight. It's not part of your defense, it's a strategic strike. Machiavelli wrote that injuries should be inflicted all at once. The same applies to communication. Say nothing until you speak. And when you speak, strike deep, then disappear again. That is psychological power. You may fear that silence will make people think you guilty, weak, or uncaring. But that fear is social conditioning. People will always judge. Your job is not to control their judgment. Your job is to dominate their perception of your control. And nothing is more unnerving than someone who does not flinch in the face of misunderstanding. The world bows to calm power, not to frantic truth-telling. Let others shout. Let them gossip. Let them accuse. Let them create their little dramas. You remain still, watching. Because what they don't realize is that you're not avoiding the fight, you're setting the stage. You are not defending yourself because you've already won. The moment they revealed their emotional chaos, they showed you their hand. And now, all you must do is wait. Power requires patience. And those who cannot master stillness will always self-destruct. This mindset is not for the faint-hearted. It requires killing the ego's addiction to validation. It requires letting go of your image in the short term so you can conquer in the long term. But once you internalize it, you become untouchable. You don't fear being misunderstood. You don't chase narrative control. You become the narrative through your silence. And that silence speaks louder than any defense ever could. Even in death, the powerful remain silent. Legends are built not by the words men defend themselves with, but by the myths they leave behind. People don't remember the explanations. They remember the aura, the force, the poise, the refusal to kneel. So remember this, when you defend yourself, you lower yourself. But when you refuse, when you stand still, cold and unreadable, you rise above the noise. And those who rise above the noise, in time, become feared. Not for what they said, but for what they never had to. So next time you're under fire, and every part of you wants to defend, pause. Let the silence stretch. Let your enemies grow louder. Let them reveal more. Because every word they speak in your absence is another piece of rope they hand you. And when the time is right, you won't defend yourself. You won't explain. You will simply act. And that, Machiavelli would say, is true power, not the man who shouts in the courtroom, but the one who walks out in silence, while the room falls apart behind him.